Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Pink Cloud Frequency. I am your host, Brianna Wynn, and today we are going to discuss the emotion drink connection, why we reach for alcohol, and how to interrupt that process. Because many women don't drink because they love alcohol. That's not why I drank, and that's not the reason you drank. You drink because you are trying to change the way you feel. So imagine it's 8:30 p.m. Your house is finally quiet, the dishes from dinner are done, the laundry's done, everything's clean. Your children are playing quietly in their bedrooms, and in that moment, you finally exhale. And what do you think to yourself? More often than not, you think to yourself that you need a drink. Not because you're dealing with some dramatic moment or an emergency or any type of chaos, but because your day catches up with you all at once. And after work, after the running around, the practices, the games, the household tasks, the check-ins, you finally have a moment to yourself. And you want to indulge in that moment to the greatest depth possible. And the only way you know how to indulge is with a glass of alcohol. You don't love the taste? Of course not. Who actually loves the taste of alcohol? And I know wine is an acquired taste. It's like coffee. But if we're really being honest, it's strong, it's acidic, it's potent. Sometimes it doesn't taste good at all. And you know that sourness that you taste when you first sip a beverage and you wince? That's not a nice, smooth taste that you want in your mouth. It doesn't smell good. It's loaded with calories. And I was just talking to a friend of mine about this because he's like, I disagree. I think it tastes great. Okay, fair enough. But I asked him, if I gave you a glass of water or even a glass of juice and you drank it and you had that reaction, that strong, pungent, acidic, taste going down your throat, and you held your chest because it was so strong, what would you think? Would you like that? Of course not. You like it because you associate that taste and that feeling with a reaction. You are drinking for the effect of alcohol. You are drinking a mind-altering substance because you're trying to alter how you feel. And that comes down to emotional regulation. Because as humans, we're always trying to regulate our emotional states. And we're not necessarily doing so consciously, but everything we do affects our state. So your feelings, those bodily sensations, your behaviors, those are psychological and physiological responses that help you respond to your environment, to events, to any type of information you're presented with. So whether you're experiencing stress or sadness or anger or even happiness, it doesn't have to be negative, right? It can be positive. But the point is you're always trying to regulate your emotional state. So when it's 8:30 p.m. and your house is quiet and you have that moment to yourself, you're seeking to self-indulge, yes, but what you really are seeking is to minimize that heaviness that you feel from your day. You want to feel that sensation of lightness and that sort of euphoria. And in order to achieve that response, maybe you'll exercise or talk on the phone to a friend. Maybe you'll eat some junk food or scroll social media. Maybe you'll do some online shopping or gamble or drink alcohol. And the reason alcohol is a solution across genders and cultures, professions, and problems is because it works so quickly. It's not like you're ordering a bottle of alcohol and waiting 3 to 5 days for it to be delivered to your door. No, you walk in the store, you buy your bottle, you come home, you pour it in a glass, and immediately your state is affected. You don't have to wait because alcohol temporarily alters your brain chemistry. Alcohol affects your dopamine, that anticipation and reward system in your brain. It affects GABA, which is the neurotransmitter in your brain that sends that chemical message to slow things down. And that's where you have that feeling of relaxation. It affects your cortisol levels. So that stress hormone is going to be temporarily lowered, and that's going to help you feel like you have reduced stress. And so that's why alcohol becomes associated with this quick relief and relaxation, and also why it's associated with excitement and reward. But what happens in that process is your brain experiences an emotion, whether it's positive or negative, and then you drink in response to that emotion because you're trying to regulate your state, and then you get that sense of relief. So now you've created a conditioned pattern for your brain. And your brain begins learning that every time you experience an emotion and drink, that you are now employing a solution for those emotions. But the thing is, you don't actually want alcohol in and of itself. What you want is the response, the relief, that solution. Many women drink in response to specific emotional states. And this is why so many of those common emotional states start to feel like triggers, which then lead you to drink. So stress is huge. Your workday was stressful. You've helped your children with homework. You've cooked dinner. Maybe you broke up some sibling arguments. You've been needed by someone all day long. So by the end of the night, whether it's 7:30 or maybe as early as 5 p.m. for some of you, or maybe as late as 9 p.m. for others, your brain is saying that you deserve a glass of wine. Again, not because you want the wine itself, but because you want the relief from your stressful day. You want a break from being everything for everyone else. You want something for yourself. Or what about when you're overwhelmed with work responsibilities, family obligations, social expectations, all your tasks? If you're like me, you have hundreds of unread emails from work, from the school with appointments and then appointment reminders, or, click this link and then click this other link and then this other link embedded in it just to figure out what's going on in your kid's school. We try to fit so much into our day. And what happens is your nervous system becomes overloaded. And alcohol begins to feel like that pause button. You might also drink because you feel lonely. Your children are growing more independent. They want to spend their free time with their friends. They can drive themselves wherever they need to go. Your friendships have probably changed over the course of years. For whatever reason, you don't spend time with the same friends that you once did. Or maybe even your partner is emotionally unavailable. You can be sitting right next to each other, but still be out of sync with one another. Whether you're surrounded by people or not, you may still feel alone. You may feel like you're not being seen in your life or heard in your life. So alcohol becomes a temporary companion. It's always available when you need it. It feels like something you can rely on, and it fills that need for validation. Alcohol can also feel like a solution to anxiety. It can help you relieve yourself from that anticipation, that anxiousness, let's say before a school event or a work meeting or even something social, right? The drink helps quiet that internal chatter. And you drink because you're trying to relieve your anxiety, but what you don't realize is alcohol is causing anxiety. So you're constantly in this cycle of being anxious, relieving the anxiety, and then having it all over again. Drinking also helps you escape boredom. For women who feel stuck in routine, life can feel mundane at times. You may have the same schedule every single day. You wake up, you go to work, you cook dinner, you tend to your family, you go to bed, and then you wake up and you do it all over again. And sometimes you rarely have time outside of that. So maybe you have limited adult stimulation. And that feeling, that structured life, that mundane existence, that manifests as this sort of quiet, low-level dissatisfaction. It's boring. And alcohol adds that artificial excitement. It makes you feel like you're doing something more than you're actually doing. And that was me. So yes, I do feel like I have an exciting life, and more so now that I quit drinking. But that's also because I'm able to be more present and my life feels full because I can enjoy the smaller moments now in a way that I couldn't when I was drinking. So little things like fresh air or sunshine, birds chirping, or reading a book, even low-level stimulation, it feels pleasurable. You feel that more when you're alcohol free. But when I drank, there were days I was so bored. So I was trying to generate a feeling of excitement, to feel like something in my life was worthwhile. I wasn't drinking to escape any negative emotion for the most part or numb out any trauma. For me, it was always fun and exciting and upbeat. Of course, until it wasn't. But I could sit on my couch by myself and drink a bottle of wine and a few shots. That would help break up the monotony of the day. And having that little bit of time was something to look forward to after a boring day. I would watch basketball on the TV, but then add in some drinks, and I'm having a great time by myself. I went from being really bored to having fun. But that type of fun is just an illusion. It's not real because nothing changed. I didn't change. My environment was still the same. I wasn't actually doing anything different. But alcohol would make me feel like I was doing more than sitting on my couch because it gives you that false sense of reality, which, yes, does feel good in the moment, but it actually prevents you from creating a genuine, fun, and exciting reality. So alcohol is helping you regulate your emotions, whether it's boredom or stress or loneliness. But the root emotion between many of those feelings is usually fear. So the boredom I just mentioned, when I would drink alcohol in those moments, that prevented me from experiencing the fear of isolation, from the awareness of, wow, I don't actually have that much going on in my life right now as it seems. As soon as that busy schedule dies down and I'm sitting here by myself, I may have a fear of getting in touch with my feelings and my life and whether or not I'm actively working on growth and goals and pursuing opportunities that were adding value to my life. So yes, I'm raising a child, as I'm sure you are, and he's an amazing kid, and so much of my life revolves around him, as I'm sure yours does for your children too. But what about that piece for you and I? What about our desires and interests and relationships and aspirations? What about our futures? Your children are eventually going to build their own families. And as moms, we prepare them to do that, but we can get lost in raising our kids. So that drive to want excitement and avoid boredom or loneliness, for me, really may have been indicative of a fear of, what does my life actually look like? So many of you experience are actually, many of your experiences are actually different expressions of fear. Fear is your brain's protective alarm system, if you will. Its job is to detect threats in your environment. But the reality is, those threats are rarely physical. They are mental and emotional. So if you're experiencing boredom, for instance, that's really a fear that your life may be stagnant. Deep down, you might know you're living out of alignment with what you're doing and what it is you really want to create. The stress that you feel can be fear of not keeping up with your responsibilities. The overwhelm that you feel is actually fear of you losing control. Your anxiety is likely a fear of negative judgment. In your loneliness is a fear of disconnection. So when women drink, they're often trying to quiet that fear response, that alarm system, and those underlying emotions. You can think of it like a crying baby. When a baby cries in the middle of the night, it's communicating a need. So maybe the baby is hungry or tired or uncomfortable or even overstimulated. Instead of picking the baby up and checking what that need is, you simply put headphones on so you can't hear the crying. The baby is still uncomfortable. The crying signaling the need is still there, but you stopped listening. And drinking alcohol works that same way because alcohol doesn't solve that underlying need. But when you temporarily quiet that signal long enough with a glass of wine, you learn to stop hearing what those needs truly are. So there's a psychological concept called urge surfing, which is used in addiction psychology. Urge surfing is a psychological technique used to ride out cravings without acting on them. The core idea is that the urges you feel are temporary, they rise, they peak, and they fall. So if you don't immediately react to the boredom or the stress or the overwhelm, then that urge is naturally going to fade. So that happens in a very short period of time. It can be as little as 60 to 90 seconds, or maybe even up to 20 minutes. But that emotional wave is going to pass. But if you interrupt that process by reacting with alcohol, then you never learn that emotions are naturally meant to move through you. So instead of trying to fight that urge when you feel an emotion, instead of trying to suppress the emotion or distract yourself from feeling, what you can do instead is observe it, process it, and allow it to pass. And that technique will help you understand that cravings are sensations in your body, in your mind. They're not commands, right? You don't have to act on them. So when you're feeling emotions, if again, you've had a stressful day at work, for instance, and you're expecting that beverage, when your brain expects that, your brain releases dopamine in anticipation. And that is what creates the craving. Because urges are driven by activity in your brain's reward and habit systems. So that dopamine pathway is what makes you feel like you need that drink. But if you stop viewing that drink as the reward for your stressful day and you start looking forward to something else, or you find another way to cope with your negative emotion in the moment, that will change how your brain responds. You're going to upset that neural pathway, so to speak. That craving you're feeling, it's going to peak and then it's going to diminish if you let it. The urge might feel permanent in the moment, but biologically, it's simply temporary neural activity. So everything you feel is limited. It's not permanent. It's not going to last forever. So when you're feeling something, you have to decide that a drink is not the solution. You have to learn to disconnect the craving from the action. So urge surfing is going to help people outlast the peak of that activity. So the first thing you want to do is name the emotion. What are you actually feeling in the moment? Are you stressed or hurt, overwhelmed or angry or bored? Naming the emotion activates your prefrontal cortex, which reduces emotional intensity. If you're really angry about something and you keep moving along in that state, you're going to amplify that emotion. But if you stop and identify and say, I am feeling angry in this moment, not I am angry. You don't want to have ownership over your emotions. You just want awareness of them and to know that they are separate from you. So when you stop and acknowledge that you're experiencing frustration and this is the reason why, you've already taken the first step in the process to reduce the likelihood of having a drink to resolve that emotion. And urges, they can feel physical too. Urges aren't purely mental. They are actually physical sensations. So anger or frustration, that may feel like tightness in your chest or heat in your cheeks. Maybe you feel restlessness or you have stomach tension or even mental fixation or repetitive thoughts about something. Most times you actually feel the sensation, which is what alerts you to be able to name that emotion. So you really want to practice awareness for those sensations and identify that emotion without reacting to it. So you're going to pause and breathe. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which signals safety to your brain. And when you feel safe, you won't have the urgency to escape what it is you're feeling. And then you're going to want to change your physical state because your body influences those emotions. So you could drink a glass of water, step outside, get some fresh air, stretch, take a short walk, or wash your face. Those small physical resets helps regulate your nervous system. I personally enjoy sprinting in place when my energy's low or if I feel a little down or even before I'm recording a podcast. I always sprint in place for like 30 to 60 seconds. And that completely shifts my attitude and it gets me going. It provides me that little boost of energy. So after you change your physical state, you're going to ask yourself, what do you actually need? Because again, often the need is not alcohol. Maybe you need rest or movement or support, or maybe you just need a moment to yourself. You may not need wine. You may need 10 minutes of alone time to let yourself think. Or maybe you need a few minutes to connect with a friend. I mean, it's entirely possible that you are feeling overworked or exhausted from a long weekend, or maybe it's your cycle. Maybe you just need rest, but whatever it is, it's important to stay in tune with your mind and body so that you can provide yourself with the nourishment you need and not just reach for a beverage. And in doing so, you're able to choose a new response and not just react by pouring a glass of wine. I can think of so many instances when I would drink almost on autopilot, which of course in the moment felt like relief or like a reward. Finally, after a long day, this is mine, right? This is for me. So I would drink and then scroll on my phone, scroll on social media. But then 2 glasses and 45 minutes later, nothing really shifted. So that feeling of feeling unseen or a little disconnected, a little alone, that doesn't really go anywhere. And then what would happen is another glass of wine later, a couple more shots, then I would drunk dial a friend. Because what I needed wasn't the alcohol. I needed to feel connected. And if I had paused long enough to notice, I may have realized I hadn't had a real conversation all day. I work from home, and my dog, as you hear her barking sometimes, she is my only company until my son gets home. So there are moments in my day where I don't feel like I'm connected. And again, as women, sometimes we are just, it's like we're always in our roles, right? As a mother, as an employee or business owner, or as a partner. But we're not in our true, authentic form as who we are. In alcohol, it didn't fix that feeling. It was just softening the feeling temporarily, but the need was still unfulfilled. So whether I was feeling lonely or I was bored and watching a show, rather than drinking and then drunk dialing, or rather than drinking more, I could have just called my friend in the first place. And in most instances, that would have met my need. And that's where we really need to be honest with ourselves about what those true needs are. And once you do that, then you're able to choose an actual response and not just react. And that's where the real freedom begins, because you get to choose intentionally. So whether you call a friend or text a friend, hey, are you free really quick? Like, I just need to hear a friendly voice or have a minute to be myself outside of all these roles that I've been, in all day long. Or maybe you read a book, or you take a shower, or you journal. Again, you might step outside, or, do the dishes, organize a closet, do something. But the point is to separate urges, whether they're physical or mental, but to separate them from your actions. It's a matter of moving away from that sensation that you feel and moving into your next moment. And that usually requires only minutes of a conscious interrupt. And every time you ride out an urge successfully, you strengthen your self-efficacy. If you listen to the last episode 15, How to Build Your Confidence in Your Alcohol-Free Life, then you know that building your self-efficacy, that process builds self-trust. And that builds your belief that you can handle future urges. That's going to help you keep building your confidence, which is going to help you build new habits and find better solutions. And honestly, sometimes everything isn't a problem that needs to be solved. It truly is an emotion that needs time to pass. Because as women, as mothers, as people living in this world, we are always feeling something. Our nervous systems are constantly working to keep us safe, so they're scanning and responding and adjusting. And depending on what's happening in your life, that can feel easy or it can feel incredibly overwhelming. Just because you quit drinking doesn't mean life suddenly becomes perfect. The stress doesn't disappear. Those hard days, they don't necessarily go away. The emotions don't stop showing up. But in your alcohol-free life, you gain the clarity to actually see what it is you're feeling. And you have the awareness to sit with that instead of numbing it. You begin to understand the difference between a true need and then a conditioned urge. You gain the energy to respond instead of react. So that moment where you may feel a pull toward a drink, that's not a command. It's information. And instead of immediately reaching for a beverage to change how you feel, you pause, you notice, you ride that wave. Your emotions are temporary even when they feel intense. You don't have to act on them. And the more you practice this, the more you trust yourself. You realize you can choose differently. Because alcohol is not the solution. It was just the fastest way for you to avoid asking those questions to yourself. But now, in your alcohol-free life, you're willing to ask those questions and sit in that discomfort. You're willing to figure out what it is you truly need, and that is where your power is. You are able to start building a relationship with yourself that's rooted in awareness and honesty and self-trust. So the next time you feel that pull, I want you to remember, you don't have to act on it. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to feel. And you are absolutely capable of choosing something different. And that choice over and over again is what changes your life. So for your reflection, the next time you feel an urge to drink, pause and go through those 5 steps and reflect on how you handled that craving. So thank you so much for listening today. Please go ahead and subscribe to the show if you haven't already. And also, if you could leave a 5-star written review, I would so appreciate that. It helps more women like yourself find this show. I will talk to you all next Wednesday.